Good morning, everybody. My name is Patty Flowers, and I recently took a trip to Iceland. And a lot of people have said, "How was your trip, Patty?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll do a PowerPoint." And so I will share it with you. So here we go. We're going to try this out. We'll share our screen right here. So here's my first slide, and we'll go ahead and do a slideshow from the beginning. Okay, so Patty's trip to Iceland, August 13th to 21st. That was not very long ago. COVID comes into play, but anxiety comes into play, but I'll talk about that in just a little bit. First thing is, why in the world did I want to go to Iceland? I had been to Iceland before, but I really wanted to see more of it. Very interested in geology. I wanted to share that geology with my sons. Only one took me up on the trip, the younger one, Matthew. One of the things that's so interesting about Iceland is the geology of it. If also the fact that I could get there direct flight on Icelandic Air. My poor son was flying and waiting in airports for a full day. But if you'll notice, Seattle is right on this ridge of mountains, of volcanic mountains. And there's a reason for that. Our continents are floating plates on top of the mantle, the hot mantle underneath of molten rock. And this Seattle ridge is where two continents are coming together, two of those plates, and they're forming mountains. And where they come together, it causes a lot of sturm and drag, and we get volcanoes. Now, if you've got two plates coming together, then you're going to have two plates coming apart somewhere else. And that is the mid-oceanic ridge. And if you look at a good map, it will show you that there is a low area right through here, and it happens to go right through Iceland. Iceland sits on top of that ridge, and you can actually see places in Iceland where the two plates are going apart. The plates being the North American plate and the European plate. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Here is a map. I've got a couple of maps of Iceland to give you a different idea of what different people see. If we notice, of course, Iceland is called the land of fire and ice. Fire because of the volcanoes and coming up and the hot steam. Ice because we've got these glaciers, large glaciers, and we're going to be driving around the glaciers. When you fly into Iceland, usually fly into the Reykjavik airport. It's located here on this little spit of land, and then Reykjavik, and that is what we did. The ridge actually goes through here and up around there, and we're going to see evidences of it. All of these are lava flows coming out from this ridge, and we'll see lots of those lava flows. So we're going to land our plane here at Keflavik, go into Reykjavik, and then we're going to go all the way around the island. This red line is basically the main road that goes around Iceland, and we'll be going around that and noticing all the different land types. We're going to start off just in this little area. This is called the Golden Triangle, and this is our Southern Triangle. And most people, that's where I had gone before. I had just not gone around the island. Okay, COVID. When I made the reservations of the trip, it was in May. All summer long, Iceland was one of the safest places to go to. It was an island. It's not very highly populated. They were highly immunized. So I had no worries about traveling there. Unfortunately, about a week or so before we left, they had a large outbreak of COVID. Someone had come in that had been immunized, was carrying the Delta variant, and just infected a lot of people. So I was very, very nervous about going. Had to, of course, get tested before I went. They checked it in the airport. They were very strict about it. But still, oh my gosh, COVID, COVID, COVID. If my son had not been going with me, I might have canceled, but I didn't. So we actually made it out. Now, here's a picture of coming in to the airport. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. This is one of Matthew's pictures, and there was the sunrise. And you can see these landforms, just marvelous. Here's a glacier. And then here is water with icebergs floating on it. We've got another picture too, same type of thing a little bit later. He likes to take pictures out the window of airplanes just like I do. It's always fun. So again, another picture of where we're going to be going. This is actually from Rick Steves. He goes around clockwise. We went around counterclockwise. Same basic trip. And here is what it looks like driving from the airport into Reykjavik. I mean, it's pretty desolate. That land, lava, has cooled, but it hasn't broken down enough to really form soil. So you don't have a lot of things growing on it. You have some small grasses. And we have lichen, there'll be lichen growing on it, but it's going to take a while for the soil to break down enough to actually support more growth. And here is Reykjavik. It's a lovely city. It's right on the sea. Most of the major cities are on the water. Almost everything is on the water. And it's a nice town. This church, I'll show another picture of in a minute. It's on the high point. That's the high point of Reykjavik, this church. I was curious about the size of Reykjavik, so I looked it up. Reykjavik has 123,000 people, so it's not real large. Iceland itself has 317,000. Now that's all of Iceland's total population. So when they have a large outbreak, we're actually not talking about a whole lot of people, keeping things in perspective. This last number, 737,000, is the population of Seattle. So there are only half as many people in the whole of Iceland as there are just in Seattle. But we got there a day early. We walked around a little bit. I mean, we got there, we had flown during the night. So it was a little bit, we were a little bit sleepy. But this is that church. It's a fairly modern, recent church. And he designed it so these columns reflect the basaltic columns of lava when it cools. And I'll show you more evidence of that later. We wanted to go inside the church and they told us we couldn't, but because they were going to have a concert later in the day. But they said, but you can buy a ticket to go see the concert and then go in. So we did. And they have a lovely, we did not stay for the concert. We were just too sleepy. But this, we did see this lovely organ. These are pipes coming straight out at you, glass pipes. And then the organ itself is down here. And it sounded like it was going to be a really nice program. It's just, I couldn't wait for another hour. I had to go back and I had to keep walking. If I sat down, I would have gone to sleep. But we did have to go by the Icelandic Hand Knitters Guild. This is a shop in Iceland, and everything is made by the Hand Knitters Guild. And since I'm a knitting fanatic, I had to take some pictures of this. This is a nice head warmer or neck warmer. And then you see these beautiful sweaters all over the place. They make little trolls and then hats. And we have some more hats here, just stacks and stacks of hats. And the same thing with sweaters as well, but very heavy sweaters, heavier than we would probably want to wear here in Seattle. A piece of modern art is the Sun Voyager. That is it's an homage to the Viking ships that came and that settled Iceland. And our transport was this van. It was a Mercedes van. It actually was able to seat 16 people. We only had 10. And I believe there were some others that were scheduled to come that did cancel because of COVID. We had a driver/guide who was Icelandic and very interesting, very good driver, had lots to say. Another thing about the people that were on this trip, if you've ever gone on a tour, there's always somebody who is always late. Not so in this trip. Everybody was always on time. Now, we did have one English gentleman who was always just in time while we were waiting on the bus, but he never was late. We actually had 4 couples, if you consider Matthew and me to be a couple. And then we had 2 single men. So we had more men on this trip than women, which is also unusual. Okay, so we're ready to take off. We're down here in Reykjavik. If I can get my arrow. We're down here in Reykjavik. And the first day we're going to go around here. Now, wherever you see the word that ends with foss, it's a waterfall. We're going to see lots of waterfalls because you've got glaciers melting and it's got to go somewhere. So this Thingvellir is very interesting. It is sort of a park. And the interesting thing about it is right on the riff. You see this huge wall. We're walking down on a path. This huge wall of rock is actually on the North Atlantic plate. And if you could see over here on this side of the walkway, there would be another huge wall of rock, and that would be on the European plate, tectonic plate. This is the place where the 2 plates, you can actually see that they are moving apart, not very rapidly, or we wouldn't be walking there. But this is part of that rift area, and this is some more. You see it, there's not a lot of growth, even though it's been around for a while. There are some trees down lower. Then we went to a geyser area. If you've got places that are very close to the mantle, you're going to have some hot springs and geysers. The water down there is boiling. It's so hot. They had warnings, do not get close to the water. It doesn't look hot when you just look at it. But when you see the smoke, it does. This was one of our first waterfall, Gullfoss. And it comes down, it goes down this lava. And see, some people are there. Didn't go that far. Then it makes a right turn, and then it goes down. It's cut through a canyon. Okay, got another view of the same thing. And also look at the rocks around it. These are the rocks that water has cut through. There you see the canyon that it's gone through. And by the way, if it's a really good shot, it's probably Matthew's shot. He took some great pictures. Okay, another waterfall, another type of waterfall. This particular waterfall, you could actually walk behind. There was a path. And that tells you I'm living near the ambulances here. Okay, so there's actually a path behind it. Yet another waterfall, Skogafoss. I stayed in the van on this one. You had to walk into it. But I've got a couple of views for you. This is a beautiful one that Matthew took with the rainbow. So it comes thundering down. It was windy. And then it will flow out on inlet to the sea. Now, I said it was windy, and I included this one to show you. If you look right here at the very beginning, you can see evidence of the wind. And now you can see it as it's flowing out to the water. Flowing out to the ocean. Now, another view of that wind is, I said I was sitting in the van, so I was taking this picture out the window of the van, and it was blowing so hard, the van was rocking back and forth. That, fortunately, was the only time we really had bad wind, and we did not have rain. We had marvelous weather. We were very, very fortunate. Now, here's an area down by the water, by the ocean, where we have those columns, basaltic columns. You've probably seen these in the park near the convention center. There are some columns. When lava, actually, when a lot of liquid things solidify under pressure, they want to get the smallest surface area they can, and they can do that by cooling in these hexagon patterns, much like a honeycomb. The water was, they said, be very careful, do not go close to the water, because there's a horrible undertow, and people have been killed pulling out there. They had a sign up and they trusted you to listen to it. Now, this was something that we saw one day. We're riding in the van and everybody was saying, oh my gosh, look at that. And everybody was quite amazed at the clouds. And I remembered Mount Rainier and the little hat above Mount Rainier that forms sometime. And so I looked it up, and it was called a lenticular cloud, formed because of various wind patterns. I'm surprised it was out here. It usually forms with updrafts from mountains, but there are no mountains right in the close vicinity. But some type of wind patterns, moisture in the clouds form that. Now, this is where we spent the night. Lovely area. We're in a little cabin looking out on this beautiful view. The lake here is a lake where a lot of waterfowl come as they migrate in the spring and the fall. So it's a good place for that. And here's the picture that my son took. That gives you a better idea of how lovely it was. Just a beautiful area. I suspect those trees were planted. Do not think they would have just come. All right, and maybe soil brought in. But there is a lot, we will see a lot of this. They grow a lot of hay for their crops, and they're able to do that. They do have enough soil. Okay, next day. Now, where we are now is around here. The next day, I'm going to drive this area. So this glacier is always going to be on our left as we drive around. We're going to do a lot of things with glaciers on this particular day. It turns out it does come down and there's a lagoon that we're going to actually take a boat trip in. Okay, now here's a park. We get out there. It's great hiking. There are great hiking abilities. I can't do that. But a lot of people come to Iceland just for the hiking and the views. But here are your glaciers up there. So this is your glacier. And here it is coming down here. And it comes down into a glacial lagoon. So here's that lagoon. With icebergs having broken off. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the end of this lagoon. It's quite long. We're going to drive to the end of it, and they actually have they have these amphibious boats like we have in Seattle, and they go out into the lagoon, and you can look at all the different forms of these icebergs that have broken off. There was somebody in a very small boat, and his job was to fish out pieces of ice for the tourist. So this particular tourist is my son, Matthew, and he was holding it. So I took a picture of him with it. Here's some more. Now this, if you'll notice, is not on water, it's on black sand. When that when that lagoon empties onto the beach, it's a black sand beach. And these chunks of ice are washed up in the beach. Here's a large chunk. Here's a smaller chunk. Here's a chunk. And there's a chunk out there. So it's really interesting looking out on this lovely beach, and there are chunks of ice floating around. Another waterfall. And there I am in my glory. Now this one's coming from a glacier way far up, and it has cut a little path down here. You see a little bit of it here, a little bit of it there. This is a closer up view. And then when it comes down closer, it looks like this. So very pretty little waterfall. I said we were driving around the glacier, and a lot of times what we were driving around looks sort of like this. This road is kept clear year round because people in Iceland need to go from place to place. And so they do keep this road clear. I mean, it snows a lot in Iceland, but they keep this road clear. Now, this is our second night, and it's on a fjord. We are driving in this direction, and we drive down there for a while, and then finally we come to the end of the fjord, and we drive back in order to get to our hotel in this little fishing village. The next night, so if you'll notice right in here, there are lots of little fjords around here. The next night, the next day, we're going to go cross country. It was a big driving day. So we go over to Lake Mybatten, which is around here. And, but it's a big driving day. And if you notice, we're not following the coast anymore. They've actually dug some tunnels. We're familiar with Bertha. They had a very long tunnel that went through the mountain that cut the time for everybody. And we're going to take that tunnel and then go cross country. And one of the things we're going to see, well, we're still seeing glaciers, but look at the ground here. And very, very rough. Nothing yet has really grown on it except for a couple of patches of vegetation. So it's pretty desolate. Our guide told us that they filmed The Martian here. If you saw the movie The Martian, this is where they filmed it, because they thought it looked pretty much like what Mars probably looks like. You can change the color of it. A hot springs area. Aha. And you notice here, there's not much separation for people walking. We were kind of surprised that they didn't have boardwalks for you to walk on and fences, but they didn't in Iceland that much. One of our members said probably they don't sue people as much here as we do in the United States. But there we are walking around. You can see steam coming from up in the hills. Let's see if I've got another one. Yes. More of that hot springs area. You would not want to get into that water. Very, very hot, superheated. And along the outskirts, there were some fumaroles that had formed. A very interesting area. Now, we've got all of this superheated water, so it does make sense that there would be close by a geothermal plant. And the heating in Iceland is done with geothermal and the electricity. And this is how they do it. Okay, road going down to it. Okay. I want to stop there. So let's try this again. If you notice that little, we're going to see a lot of those, that's covering up a hole through which steam is coming. And the steam goes through the pipe going from it. So we're going to see that, and then we're going to see some buildings. These pipes all merge at these buildings, and the buildings make electricity. Okay. Now we'll do that again. Now we'll go through the whole thing. So we see those little places. That's the road, but then we have lots of pipes. This is a pipe. See those pipes there? It's a large field. And they're collecting steam. I really thought it was interesting. And it was a very interesting place. Now we're at Lake Mybatten area, and we're going to spend the night there. But before we do, we walked through this area. These were fumaroles that were formed underwater. And then when the land rose and the water subsided, they give you these marvelous forms. But it was but the hollow in the middle, because the water came up and it spurted around the outside. Here's another one. And I also like the sky in this one. This was our hotel. And let me say, these are the only two pictures I have of sheep, but there were sheep all over the place. You'd look out, all these empty fields that you think that they were empty. They weren't really farms. They let the sheep sort of go, and then they round them up once a year and they separate them out with all the baby sheep. So the sheep are pretty much free to wander. So I had to include this because we saw a lot of sheep. We ate sheep too, sheep, fish, mostly fish, and then lamb. And here's another picture of it. And you can see it's fairly deserted. I mean, fairly desolate out there. There is some greenery, but there's a lot of rock. And here is that lake. It's a very shallow lake. It's only about 4 feet deep. And there are a lot of birds come to that lake because there are a lot of insects in that lake. There's, we ran into quite a few midges, and they lay their larvae, and the birds really like larvae. So we ran into that. Okay, so we are around here, and the next night we're going to go over. We're going to take this drive over here, and we're going to see more farmland. And in the farmland, we'll see some old houses that were made out of blocks, peat blocks, that they dried, and then they used them for construction. You don't have any trees. I guess they could have used rocks, but maybe the rocks haven't broken up enough for use. Here you can see this beautiful countryside, and there was a lot of farming going on. We saw a lot of bales of hay, or of whatever this crop is, that were rolled up and in plastic, that they were going to store and use for the wintertime. One thing to look through here is these striations. There are actually different lava flows. And our guide said that it slopes down to where the Rift Valley is. Here we are. There's my son, Matthew, at another hot springs area. And here I am, hiking boots on and everything. Another hot springs area. They were using the heat from this to grow flowers in a greenhouse. And you notice the different colors, so that's different minerals in the water. And as it splashes up and it cools, it stays on the rock. Some more, you can see the different colors. Now, we talked about sheep. We saw a lot of sheep. We also saw a lot of horses. Now, these are smaller horses. They're Icelandic horses, very, very sturdy. It's a breed specifically on Iceland, and they're bred for riding up these hills and holding heavy Icelanders. They are quite sturdy. They're about the size between a pony and a horse, and you dare not call them ponies. They get very, very insulted if you call them ponies. They are horses, and we saw them all over the place. We also saw some cows, not a whole lot of cows, but we did see some. Now, this is our last night, or our last night traveling, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful area. And you can see one of these horses right in there. The person that owned this also had a dairy farm. not too far away. So you do have some cows for meat and you have some cows for dairy, but mostly you see sheep and horses. They don't eat their horses. Okay, I think this is our last waterfall. Beautiful waterfall. And it's a waterfall, but it's an interesting waterfall. This water is not coming from above. This water is coming between. There are layers of volcanic rock, and this water is coming from way far away from a glacier. But it's coming through those layers. Here at the end, I mean, there's no glacier immediately above it, but it's coming through those. And another thing to note, you can tell it's glacial water because you look at this blue, the blue cloudy, that's glacial till, and it refracts the light that way. Another picture of it, you can see the layer right up here. So that's what this water is coming through. Almost home, beautiful. Now, see, we have more growth here. So this was obviously an older lava flow that has had time for the lava to decompose and for the sill. Now, one of the things I was the most worried about when I was just before this trip, it was getting my COVID test in order to take the plane to go to Iceland. Also, we had to take a test before we came home. And I was very worried about how that was going to be scheduled because our last day, we were out till about 4:00 and did not get back into Reykjavik until late. And my son had to leave at about 7 in the morning. But it turns out, even though they didn't tell us at the time, they had it all thought out. When we drove back into Reykjavik, our last stop was by the COVID test. Iceland has this one area in Reykjavik that you call up for appointments. You get your appointments online, and we all did that. And then we all went in and got tested, and we're all negative, which was good. And trolls at the airport. Matthew took this picture, and I thought it'd be a nice one to include for our presentation. Trolls and Iceland sort of go together. Well, that's it, guys. That's my trip to Iceland, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed giving it to you.